Increasing numbers of people are being exposed to more and more threats to their brains and minds, resulting from changes to the environments in which they live. Catastrophic events such as hurricanes, droughts, floods, the list goes on, are already taking their toll. But so are the chronic and invisible effects of air pollution, extreme heat, and contaminated food and drink. This analysis suggests that human mental competency, also known as intelligence, is not just under a growing threat, but is already being negatively affected by environmental conditions. Neurological damage is also being attributed to environmental change, as rates of autism, dementia, and multiple forms of brain damage are reported increasing at alarming rates. This report was compiled and written to show what scientists, journalists, politicians, and victims are saying about how and why these mental afflictions are happening, as well as what healthcare professionals and governments are reported to be doing about it. Content analysis indicates that cognitive performance is already being negatively affected by the air people breathe, while the intelligence deficit is liable to increase in the future if air quality continues to deteriorate. The main risks are seen as coming from vehicle exhaust and airborne plastics said to be found everywhere. Rising levels of CO2 itself is also seen as a cause behind the reduced rates of intelligence. Research cited indicates that people suffer significantly higher CO2 concentrations indoors than outside. Sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and particulates smaller than 10 micrometers in diameter are characterized as especially dangerous. What is described as a, quote, substantive decline in general population intelligence is said to apply around the world. This reversal of what researchers call the Flynn effect, whereby intelligence was found to be increasing year on year in the 1950s and 1960s, was found to have started in 1975. A link was also reported found between age and time of exposure to air pollution and decreased mental capabilities. Multiple sources inside homes, such as toys, furniture, plastic bags, cosmetics, clothes, and scrubs, are said to be sources of breathable plastic microparticles, with babies most exposed because they spend most of their time on the floor, which is where the plastic dust falls. Outdoors, the concentration of breathable plastic particles is expected to increase as incineration starts to replace recycling after the Chinese import ban. Recent studies blame CO2 itself for its, quote, direct and negative impact, unquote, on cognition and decision-making, and at levels experienced by most Americans today, that is, inside classrooms, offices, homes, airplanes, cars, where CO2 levels are said to be inevitably higher than outdoors. Volatile organic compounds, said to be found, quote, everywhere, from plastics and newspapers to ceiling tiles and vinyl floors, are also found to impair mental performance. Content analysis indicates that chemicals, which have been found to decrease IQ, are being increasingly detected in food and drinking water. Multiple independent studies are reported finding, quote, overwhelming evidence, unquote, that even small doses of chlorpyrifos, the herbicide just approved by the EPA, decreases the IQ of children starting before they are born. It is already said to be found in food and water at levels considered to be, quote, unsafe. Research cited indicates exposure to widely used organophosphate pesticides and fluorides during pregnancy also decreases intelligence. Another study is cited which indicates that IQ scores can be adversely affected with blood concentrations of lead 50% lower than previously thought. Other research suggests that up to 89% of baby foods had detectable levels of lead in them, even though no known level is considered to be safe. One researcher makes the point that food and water are tested only for the effects of individual contaminants, never in combination, which is how they nearly always occur in real life. Content analysis suggests that cognitive impairment afflicts all age groups when the indoor environment becomes too hot, especially if it is poorly ventilated. The provision of air conditioning is starting to be seen as an ethical and social issue because overheating disproportionately affects poorer people and ethnic minorities. Researchers are reported finding it, quote, really shocking that resilient populations of healthy 18 and 19-year-olds suffer decreased cognitive abilities in the heat. As a result, researchers infer that people living in hotter places without the benefit of air conditioning are being put at a cognitive disadvantage. Content analysis indicates that this topic, which includes brain-eating amoeba and parasites, is not receiving the coverage it merits, given its gravity. The number of people affected is thought to be very large, already creating what is described as a, quote, global intelligence gap. Brain parasites are said to be taking a, quote, untold toll on human intelligence. Normally found in algae, chlorovirus, which is described as taking a rapid evolutionary leap from infecting just plants to infecting humans, was found by researchers at Johns Hopkins University to be in 20% of all subjects tested. People testing positive for chlorovirus are estimated to have a 10% reduction in their cognitive faculties. While content analysis suggests that autism results from a complex combination of genetic and non-genetic influences, Harvard research predicts that on current trends, contamination of food by Monsanto's glyphosate will make 50% of children autistic by the year 2025. The environmental risk factors for autism are said to include much more than being exposed to chemicals and toxins, and include non-genetic factors such as parental age at conception, nutrition during pregnancy, and preterm births. Experts are cited saying that autism is not caused or prevented by single factors, but is influenced by combinations of genetic and non-genetic factors, including aluminium, DDT, organophosphate pesticides, chlorpyrifos, and glyphosate, marketed as Roundup by Monsanto. Research is cited at Harvard showing a, quote, remarkably consistent correlation, unquote, between the use of Roundup on crops and rising numbers of autistic children with the biomarkers indicating excessive glyphosate. The report concludes, at today's rate, by 2025, 1 in 2 children will be autistic. Content analysis suggests that the rate of dementia is growing fast and will continue to increase as megacities polluted with nitrogen oxides and PM 2.5 microparticles grow and proliferate around the world. Because the disease starts in childhood and progresses through life, the risk is liable to be locked in, even if pollution rates fall. Concerns are expressed that multiple sources of exposure to aluminium, sugar, and cyanobacteria toxins will also add to dementia risks, increasing the chances of a full-blown Alzheimer's epidemic. Alzheimer's is said to affect people of, quote, all ages, but starts in early childhood and progresses over time. Research cited suggests that there are higher risks in polluted megacities and areas with the highest level of nitrogen oxides, NOx, a constituent of diesel exhaust. Research also indicates that people living near major roads are up to 12% more likely to develop the disease by breathing in tiny PM 2.5 particles. Another study cited in the database found, quote, hallmarks of the disease among 99.5% of the subjects they examined in Mexico City, unquote. Aluminium is also seen as being related to skyrocketing rates of Alzheimer's, with what are described as multiple avenues of exposure being of, quote, great concern. Another report draws a link between microcystis created by blooms of cyanobacteria and increased rates of dementia. Finally, research is cited which found the, quote, first connection between consuming too much sugar and Alzheimer's. Content analysis indicates that the brain is increasingly under threat, both from sources long identified but not yet rectified, as well as from newly identified sources. There are also suggestions indicating current standards regulating concentrations of toxins are not high enough to prevent potential brain damage. The list of threats identified include gases in the atmosphere, pesticides, algae toxins, mercury, lead, and biological infections. Also, despite nearly 15 years of study, disagreement and confusion continue to keep the debate going about the effects on the brain of mobile phones and electromagnetic radiation. It is said that gases and small particles in air pollution can negatively impact the brain, resulting in, quote, everything from behavioral changes to neurodegeneration. Pollution is found to impact on important stress hormones such as dopamine and cortisol that influence mood, while also causing brain inflammation and other negative biological processes. The evidence is described as overwhelming, that even in small doses, chlorpyrifos can damage parts of the brain that control language, memory, behavior, and emotion. A 2012 US study is cited which found chlorpyrifos in the umbilical cord of 87% of newborn babies tested. Algae blooms are reported releasing toxic chemicals called BMAA, which is linked to the development of motor neuron disease. Tests are reported indicating that BMAA was present in 70% of samples collected from waterways in New South Wales, Australia. Lead is also portrayed as a potent neurotoxin, which can cause irreversible damage. So serious concern is expressed over a study indicating that 55% of school districts in a wealthy and diverse community near New York City have lead contamination in their tap water. It is also said that the latest research indicates that safe concentrations of lead in the blood is 50% lower than previously thought. While mercury is described as being 1,000 times more toxic than lead, it is reported that 49% of samples tested showed mercury concentrations in excess of the EPA limit of 0.3 parts per million. A brain-eating amoeba called Naegleria fowleri is reported to have been discovered in Louisiana water systems. The authorities are quoted saying that the water is safe to drink, but are warning people to avoid getting any of it in their noses. Another source of parasitic brain infection, acquired by touching slugs and snails, is reported spreading at an increasing rate in Hawaii. The report says that it has also popped up in California, Alabama, Louisiana, and Florida. The most recent study cited suggests that there is some evidence linking microwaves and gliomass of the brain, while a few epidemiological studies report higher tumor rates in long-term mobile phone users. However, after many years of studies, the research is still considered to be, quote, confusing and ambiguous, part of what one scientist calls the largest biological experiment ever, which could take decades before the answer is discovered.